taking the moment to try and make any...
What you want to do is save hundreds.
right, y'all. What's going on? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to go over today. We have um, Iran launching drones. We have Russia acting crazy. Ukraine launching even more strikes. Um, this is more strikes I've seen Ukraine do in the whole war. It's massive what they're doing to Russia right now. So I mean it's only on the great elites in Russia now to see what's going to happen, because I mean with them doing this, with them bombing Moscow like this, it's going to be getting really really on the edge. Um, I mean Putin's on the edge now. I mean he barely even comes out of the bunker, but as you can see right there, live footage right there, in Barrett, what's going on there. We also have live footage. I apologize about that. Yeah, I did not merge that. Um, we have live footage of there. Excuse me, y'all. Um, gas prices. Right now is at $98 a barrel. About 98 and a half. So we're right on the edge of $100 a barrel right now. It's a little bit better than it was, or it has been. So it is up 0.34%. As you can see with the air traffic that is going around the Middle East, this is supplies, and this is also they have a radioactive. Russia, I apologize. Russia has a radioactive drone flying over Ukraine for some reason. Things are getting heated. I'm just saying. I mean, they don't have this stuff flying around for no reason. I mean, they could be doing testing on new equipment, but I mean, what new equipment is Russia actually building these days? I mean, I think they're putting all their infrastructure and trying to get all their the oil refineries back up and running. But today's show is going to be crazy. Bear with me here. Let's get some more people in here. And I'm going to get some of this stuff shared out real quick for us, so we can actually get some more people in here, and actually maybe get some calls today. That'd be nice. Let me turn the phone lines on as well. I almost forgot to do that. Let me share this real quick on Facebook. That is shared. But we also have Trump saying, and I quote, that he was an hour away from actually striking Iran the other day, but he wanted to actually hold back for more diplomacy. Of course, the United States is going to try to set up for diplomacy, because this is what the United States do. They try to settle things with negotiation, before anything, before violence. That's just the way it's been for years and years and years since the Vietnam War. I mean, except for when we got attacked with the World Trade Centers and everything. But y'all don't want to miss tonight's show. Like I said, we have a lot to go over. We
We are seeing that Iran is
one sec.
also big news out. Good evening, folks. It's been Forster Matt.
All right. But I mean, another thing that's going to be start to come up here soon on the channel is that we're going to actually have a stock market slide. So we're going to show you all the cryptos too, as well as regular stocks as well. We're going to try to bring that in tuition with the live stream show news. So if y'all if y'all are for that, just let me know. Drop a chat and let me know. We have some stuff going on over here on. Let me go studio. So what's going on here? But anyways, we have smoke rising out of Barrett still. I mean, that's been like that for quite a while now. So I'm not for sure if this is new, fresh attacks. Um, we're gonna find out. And I will have that later on into the show. It looks like same attack. It's just stuff still smoking. And I guess buildings are still on fire, or maybe they got it out and they just smothering now is just smoke. But I mean, it still looks a little black, so it's saying that something is still on fire there. So, but we also see. Oh, there we go. That the United States has been actually having several cargo shipments to the Middle East. They have actually taken defensive weapons out of Germany, actually, and taken them to. Now this is not confirmed. This is just something I read off of X that they've taken defensive weapons from Germany and placed them towards the Middle East and Israel. So I don't know how true that is. So I take that with a grain of salt. But you can also see right here on the screen where our main carriers, super carriers, and all of our air power. But anyways, let's get over here to the live stream, y'all. And let's cut it over here. So, but yeah, that's basically a rundown about what's going on. Be talked about today. I hope y'all hold on because it's gonna be a wild one. We have a lot that's going on. It is really crazy. How close we are to actually having. I mean, I'm not saying a nuclear weapon, maybe a tactical nuclear weapon used in Ukraine. It's getting that serious. Seriously, it's getting insane. But further ado, let's get to the news.
7 of the War News stream, and tonight we have very big news out of Iran and also big news out of Lithuania and NATO countries as well. We are seeing that Iran this evening has declared full control over the Strait of Hormuz, including the territorial waters of the Gulf states as well, in a major escalation. Also, Iran has launched a major attack on U.S.-backed Iraqi bases this evening, and also we've heard that Lithuania has apparently been raided by drones from Belarus in a very big turn of events, I would say. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments from the Middle East, Eastern Europe, East Asia, and the Americas over the course of the day. We have been able to hear of significant developments within the Strait of Hormuz, as the Islamic Republic of Iran has officially announced today that they are now extending their area of control and annexation of the waters of the Strait of Hormuz, which is now including significant parts of the coastline of Oman and the UAE, which Iran is now claiming is under their direct control and jurisdiction. This is a blatant violation of the sovereignty of the United Arab Emirates and the Republic of Oman, or the Kingdom of Oman, and we have seen it at the moment. There has not been any significant response by the UAE and Oman directly, but we have been able to hear news that in the background, the UAE is attempting to get a coalition of Gulf states built up together to be able to prepare for some sort of an armed action against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and have already attempted to do so in the past. At the same time, the United States is attempting to forward another list of terms to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and has stated that a peace deal is just around the corner. Although, just yesterday, we were being told that if the Iranians didn't agree to a deal, or didn't find a way to agree to a deal within 72 hours, they were going to be bombed quite ferociously. At the moment, there is still 48 hours left to that deadline, and we have seen that the Iranians are not taking the moment to try and make any sort of a peace deal, at least on their end. They are using the moment to prepare themselves for war, as the Islamic Republic of Iran's government officials, including Ghalibaf, have stated today that they believe that a war with the United States is inevitable, and the civilians and the military of Iran must prepare themselves in every way, case and form, for the eventuality with conflict with the United States of America once again. We've also been able to hear that the U.S. did seize another tanker over the course of the day, and the IRGC did conduct attacks against Kurdish forces in northern Iraq over the past few hours. American aerial tankers are still airborne in significant numbers within the area, and Israeli Air Force activity has been denoted over the area of Daraa, Syria, once again showing that the Israeli Air Force is apparently pre-basing outside of Israel's borders, possibly to prepare for any kind of a preemptive attack that the Iranians might throw their way at any moment. Outside of that, we have been able to hear of an ongoing air defense situation in Lithuania, as the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense has announced that there is an active and ongoing drone incursion into the borders of their country that originated from the territory of Belarus. At this moment, NATO aircraft have been scrambled from surrounding countries and inside of Lithuania as a part of the Baltic Shield aerial response that has been ongoing for over a year at this point, to be able to try and track down and destroy these drones that have entered Lithuanian airspace, which may or may not be Russian, but highly likely are given the circumstances surrounding this incident at the moment. We have also been able to hear additionally that the NATO General Secretary or Secretary General has made threats to the Russian Federation about the possibility of tactical nuclear weapons usage inside of Ukraine, and while that was being made as a threat, the Ukrainian armed forces were landing more hits and drone attacks onto the capital city of Moscow over the course of this day. Simultaneously, we've also been able to hear that Dmitry Peskov has announced on behalf of Putin that the war will continue until the Ukrainians surrender, and we've also been able to hear that almost every single oil refinery within central Russia has been hit, knocked out, or completely stopped in terms of production by Ukrainian attacks that have been conducted over the past several weeks. We've also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is working on nuclear readiness drills at this moment, and a significant hit has once again been recorded at the Kostovo refinery, which we were breaking as a news story last night when we were getting towards the latter end of our show, and we have a lot more information today showing that the Kostovo refinery has been officially knocked out. The Ukrainian armed forces have also been continuing significant attacks against Russian forces on the main lines, and have been able to stop most, if not all, Russian advances over the course of the day, inflicting significant casualties while the Ukrainian government looks north towards Belarus, and continues to state that the ever-imminent threat of a possible invasion from the borders of Belarus is still one of great concern for the armed forces of Ukraine and the state of Ukraine, and they are putting all of their efforts and attention in that direction. We've also been able to see, additionally, that the People's Republic of China has announced that they are furthering their cooperation and friendship with the Russian Federation during a meeting that Vladimir Putin is currently at this moment inside of Beijing, and we've now been able to hear that Xi Jinping is apparently going to be traveling sometime this week into the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un, which looks to be some form of a diplomatic consolidation of the Axis powers that are currently existing globally. We've also been able to hear that the United States is still working on preparing a casus belli against the communist Cubans, and we have been able to see the continued surveillance has been conducted over the course of the day. But nevertheless, folks, we are going to be making sure to get through each and every single piece of this news, starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. But before we even get into our first piece of news tonight, we have been able to hear that there is some mildly breaking news that's happening at this moment right now. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we have some mildly breaking news. That's the only way I know how to put that because it's nothing that's happening like right this second, like attack wise or military action wise. But we are seeing that apparently the airspace of Iran is completely empty, despite there being no public NOTAMs, meaning notice to airmen being active over the airspace of Iran. So that is somewhat unusual. Of course, Iran's having reduced activity because of the fears that the war could restart. But let's take a look. And actually, it is actually dead empty right now inside the Iranian airspace. That's a live view right there on Flight Radar 24. So that is interesting. Not a flight in sight. Not to rhyme that right there, but that's quite interesting. And Forster, what do you make of that?
I didn't say that it is quite interesting, but I would also have to add that it might not be indicating much of anything. There have been some moments during the past few weeks where we've seen that Iranian airspace has cleared out temporarily, but usually gets back into some limited level of activity because there isn't really a lot of flights that go in or out of Iran outside of Iran's state airlines, which are basically the only companies that operate within Iranian airspace at this point. For that reason, air traffic volume is always low these days, and it's somewhat common sometimes to see a blip. Like right now, we're actually seeing that an Iranian state airlines aircraft just popped up on flight transponder, once again showing everybody here really quickly that while this always looks like it is kind of interesting, usually it's actually a little bit more mundane, just given the fact that the state airlines of Iran don't have a lot of aircraft or a lot of scheduled flights, and outside of them, there's nobody operating in their airspace, so sometimes it gives the indication that the airspace has been emptied for something to happen, and then in reality, nothing happens. We can actually see another Iranian state airline aircraft has finally just also appeared on flight radar as well. So while it looks interesting, there's not really a lot to report out. This is more status quo at the moment.
Interesting. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, but it looks like there are some aircraft popping up out of the woodwork all of a sudden now after I said that. So it looks like there are a couple there. It looks like it's just the state airline though, but there are some aircraft there. Also, one just disappeared right there again. So they're being very secretive over the skies of Iran right now, to say the least.
It does appear so. But moving us on out of that information right there, it is time for us to get on into our breaking news over the course of this day. And moving us on and into our largest story of the day, we are immediately going to be heading into the area of the Strait of Hormuz. As many of you all know, this is one of the largest topics and stories that's unfolding in the world every day. And currently, we do understand that the Islamic Republic of Iran is attempting to exert further influence over the Strait of Hormuz, while at the same time, the United States is insisting that a deal is just around the corner, and the hostilities are largely all but over at this point on their end. And we have been able to hear that over the course of this day, the Islamic Republic of Iran is now extending its zone of control. This was according to the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which is the new authority that has been created by the Islamic Republic of Iran to be able to exert direct military control over the Strait of Hormuz and practically annex the waters around the area. And this is what we have as follows as their announcement today. The Islamic Republic of Iran has defined the regulatory jurisdiction of the management of the hashtag Hormuz Strait as follows. I didn't know that was a geographical parameter. I didn't know, Matthew, that when we sat there and we're calling the Strait of Hormuz the Strait of Hormuz for months now, that it was actually hashtag Hormuz Strait.
You know, Iran's living in a different time. They still use hashtags instead of Iran for whatever reason, and they've seemed like use that constantly to like make these movements and stuff like that. So I guess they're still using it.
I guess so. Really odd, honestly. But beyond that, they have stated the following about the Hormuz Strait. The line connecting the Mubarak in Iran to the south of Fujairah in the UAE at the eastern entrance of the strait to the line connecting the tip of Qeshm Island in Iran to the al-Quwan in the UAE at the western entrance. Transit through this area for the purpose of passing through the Hormuz Strait requires coordination with and authorization from the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, which is operated directly by the Islamic Republic of Iran's government. This is also showing on their own infographic the area that they have attempted to directly exert control of, which is the area in blue, the actual Hormuz Strait, and now the area that they're announcing is under their complete control today, which includes everything else in red. This is showing that they are now starting to annex the waters of the Gulf states, at least according to their own public announcements, and they are going to be attempting to exert direct control over several major ports within the area that aren't even theirs, including the port of Ras Al Khaimah here within the northern part of the United Arab Emirates, which is a very large port facility, mind you all, any major city of the United Arab Emirates. And they're also going to be attempting to exert direct influence over the cities of Korfakan and also the city of, I believe, Kalba as well, including Fajira, which is quite a significant area of control and is also attempting to challenge the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Oman and also the United Arab Emirates as well within this area, because according to international law, the waters extending about 13 miles off, unless if there's a conflict due to the proximity of nations in an area, are under the control of that specific country. So now the Iranians are announcing that they are pretty much going to be controlling the waters literally leading into most of the major UAE ports that are not around the area of Dubai and Sharjah, and they're also going to be attempting to exert direct control over the Kingdom of Oman's territory as well with this action today. This is a fairly significant escalation, and while it seems like to some that it might not be that big of a deal, this is attempting to directly challenge the sovereignty of a great deal of nations in their waters within this area, and is attempting to exert even further military control over the entirety of the Strait of Hormuz and everything surrounding it. This is a significant threat to the freedom of navigation within the area, as everybody knows, and this is also attempting to allow the Islamic Republic of Iran's armed forces to be able to try and conduct even further military actions to create a larger buffer zone that would be even more difficult to get through. This is, of course, a significant issue. At the same time, we did get to see that one South Korean vessel did get to move through the strait today. Apparently, it was the South Korean flag super tanker Universal Winner, which was carrying Kuwaiti crude, and did transit the Strait of Hormuz today along the Iranian-approved route south of the island of Larak. This was the only vessel that we've seen today on Ship Tracker that was able to make it through the Strait of Hormuz, and it looks like it most likely paid a toll. We also got to see that from the Islamic Republic of Iran state-owned television network, Tasnim News, they also showed footage of a prior armed attack on one of the oil tankers that attempted to transit the strait, but had been directly attacked and hit by a Iranian one-way attack drone. These sorts of one-way attack drones have been used significantly by the Islamic Republic of Iran to be able to try and cause material damage to the ships that have attempted to challenge their blockade inside the Strait of Hormuz, and you can see this vessel here getting directly hit. I do want to make it clear that this attack did not happen today. This attack had actually happened some time ago and is somewhat old footage, but we're finally seeing it here for the first time. And we see them also showing their watermark there at the very end, making sure to let everybody know that it was them who did the handiwork, and nobody else gets the credit for it. But outside of that, it does appear quite clear at this point that the Islamic Republic of Iran is continuing to escalate in the midst of the United States claiming, as they did today, that a peace deal is just around the corner, and they're going to be agreeing to everything that we want, and everything's going to be honky-dory, and we're all going to shake hands, we're going to kiss each other on the cheeks, and then we're going to go home. And that doesn't seem to be the case at all. It actually seems that they're now escalating the situation and annexing even further amounts of waters within the area and attempting to control them by military means, meaning that they will be the ones who actually physically control these areas. And right now, nobody, not even the UAE and Oman, is directly challenging this extension of their control within the area. We were able to hear that within the city of Abu Dhabi, there does appear to have been some sort of an effort by the UAE's government to try and convince Saudi Arabia and Qatar to coordinate a military response to Iranian attacks at the start of the war, according to Bloomberg. Saudi Arabia and Qatar said it wasn't their war, despite Iranian attacks on their territory, and the UAE and Saudi Arabia separately carried out limited retaliatory strikes against.
Hey, just to let everybody know that call lines are open tonight. Just to let y'all know, call lines are open tonight, 540-251-7687. If y'all want to call in, shout out. Call lines are all open. If y'all just want to call in and talk about the news, talk about politics, about what's going on in Iran. If y'all want to call in and talk about what's going on in Russia, let me know. Just call in the line. It's 540-251-7687.
The Iranians, but nothing in large scale from what we now understand. Bahrain, Kuwait, and Oman were also targeted by Iran during the war, but opted to stay out of the conflict. So from what we're seeing now, the situation has of course changed, and we would also believe that due to these prior statements that are now coming out, that the UAE was attempting to rally some sort of a Gulf coalition against the Iranians, we would start to believe that this is probably a decent likelihood in the present day, that the UAE is most likely still attempting to create some sort of a Gulf coalition of states to be able to go up against the Islamic Republic of Iran and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Reopening the strait is of vital economic importance to all of these nations within the Gulf, as they are not able to export any of their oils out whatsoever in the current conditions with the strait remaining closed. And right now, a lot of people are talking about what is going to be happening here in the near future. And now that the Iranians are claiming that they control the entirety of the Strait of Hormuz, including large parts of the territorial waters of the UAE and Oman. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so also, by the way, apologies, by the way, YouTube has made an update apparently. Now they're putting polls and announcements at the bottom of the chat box. That is a awful change, by the way. I don't know why YouTube just likes to screw stuff up occasionally like that, but they've done it again. They have struck. But anyways, though, the poll says Iran has announced that it now controls all of the Hormuz Strait, including the Gulf states' territorial waters. So what's going to happen now? Because that's a pretty big announcement they just made today in the midst of alleged peace talks going well with the United States. So 35% said Iran will likely attack the Gulf states soon directly, while 29% said Iran will start patrols near the Gulf states soon, and 29% said this really means nothing really in reality. And it does mean something. What this means is Iran is solidifying their control even further over the Hormuz Strait. And not only that, but now they're threatening the sovereignty of the territorial waters of the Gulf states themselves. So this is actually worse than we thought. And now Iran has a semi-professional authority. I don't know what they're calling it, the Port Authority of Iran or something, that controls the Strait of Hormuz. Whatever it's called is irrelevant. It's just some fake body they came up with to control the strait. So I'm going to say that I believe Iran will likely start running patrols near the Gulf states' territorial waters just to show off, and we could see possible confrontations come out of that. Because obviously, if the Gulf states allow Iran to basically take over their waters, at that point, the Gulf states are letting Iran take over, some of their territory, basically, which would be insane, to say the least. So we haven't seen that yet. We're waiting to see.
Now, I'm just going to let y'all know that the United States cannot, well, better not, and should not let that happen. And I'll tell you the reason why. And we're going to get down to it. This is why. It's because if they start charging tolls to all the Gulf states to carry their cargo or oil out of the Strait of Hormuz, this is what's going to happen is they're literally going to continue to do that. They're not going to stop. And they're going to just keep on charging more and more and more and more and more and more and more. That's the thing with this kind of group, this radical group that we have in Iran. It's a bunch of crazy people in there. If you really want to know, it's crazy to think that you're going to order your soldiers to maul down almost 50,000 of your own citizens that's not armed with no weapons. Now, just let that sink in for a second. Now, imagine if the United States did the same thing over here. And all these protesters that you see in California and San Diego and everywhere else, they're protesting everywhere. They don't just go out and hit them with tear gas or flashbangs or rubber bullets or tasers or handcuff you or take you to jail. They just maul you down, kill you in front of your kids and everything. And just let that sink in for a second. All right, they didn't care. They had snipers on the roof sniping people. Like I've seen images of it, and I can't even show it on the show because if I did, the video would get banned, and then my channel would probably get banned from it. I'm just letting y'all know that's how gross and gruesome the pictures are. It's crazy. But that's something that can't be allowed because the only thing that's going to happen is, like I said, is they're just going to continue to keep on charging more and more and more. And not just that. I mean, they're already going through rough seas and everything else and putting up with a lot. Why the heck are they going to have to stop again? I don't know. It's just a lot going on right now over there. And then not just that, it ain't like they're going to get through the blockade on the other side. But we'll see what happens. We're going to keep track of this situation very closely. and let y'all know and keep y'all up to date. As y'all can see, that smoke is still coming from Lithuania and Barrett. That was actually smoking yesterday as well. So like I said, I'm not 100% sure right now if it was actually the old strike or if this is actually new strikes that's actually going on. We don't see no camera movement or anything like that. We don't see. Okay. All right, but anyways, let's get back to the news, y'all.
See what Iran's going to do to exercise control over the situation, but we'll have to see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that it's most likely going to be the case that the Islamic Republic of Iran is going to start conducting patrols near the Gulf states soon, because direct attacks, at least at the moment, such as attacking the land or surface of these countries, is highly unlikely, but they are going to start exerting direct control over the waters within these areas, because this sort of an announcement is a deliberate one by the Iranian government, where they're attempting to create a further buffer zone to be able to stop ships from basically sitting right at the very cusp of passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and then passing through and then making it through most of Iran's defenses. This is attempting to lengthen the amount of the gauntlet that a ship would have to pass through and making the voyage even more difficult to conduct. This is also attempting to try and exert direct control over major ports within the United Arab Emirates, which would be able to see that they might be able to try and charge some form of excises or fees on these vessels to be able to try and moor at UAE ports that are claimed to be in the territorial waters that they control. They certainly could try and conduct that, because any vessel that is sitting a couple of miles out from a UAE port and is waiting to enter could have an IRGC fast attack boat come up to them, board the ship, and then tell them to pay up a fee, or else they're about to get seized and then sent to Iran. So I would say that that's most likely the high likelihood that's coming out of this at the moment. But I have to say, folks, that this is showing, as we've been saying for a while now, and it gets very exasperating, folks, to say this, because I know that all of us are on the same page here, but it's absolutely ridiculous to think that the government isn't on the same page. The Iranians are clearly not wanting to negotiate with the United States. They're working even harder to screw us over. Every single day that the folks in the White House talk whatever the hell they're saying each day, the Iranians are going to sleep every night thinking of another way to try and screw us over in the Strait of Hormuz. And they seem to be completely blind about that fact, and they just keep letting this go on. We have to conduct a military action to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or we are screwed. There is no other way that this is going to go. There is no amount of thumbnails from any YouTube channel that says that the U.S. military just finished Iran that is going to reverse the fact that not a single oil tanker is going through the strait right now. They can't go through the strait, and Iran's going to make it that much more difficult to get a ship through the strait by extending their zone of control as far as they can. If we were to take the average measurement right now of a voyage through the strait from where the Iranians declare is under their control to the other side, if we measured that out through the Larak lane, that voyage would be approximately 200 miles long. A ship travels at about 10 miles an hour, usually most oil tankers do. So that means that an oil tanker would have to be in the strait for nearly an entire calendar day, around 20 hours, at full speed to be able to make it through what the Iranians now claim that they control. That is 20 hours of time that they are going to have to fire at any single oil tanker that goes through this strait, and the U.S. is not there at the moment challenging that fact and stopping them from firing on tankers that are attempting to pass through. We're not creating an easier situation. We're not lessening the strategic pressure. We're doing absolutely nothing. We're letting them, actually, we're not just doing nothing, we're letting the Iranians actively work to try and find a way to screw us over even farther while we sit back and wait and do absolutely nothing to them, which is an absolute mistake and a complete embarrassment at this point, with how much the Iranians are taking advantage of the fact that the U.S. government just keeps just speaking mistruths to the public and saying that we're right around the corner to a peace deal, and then the next day the Iranians announced that they found a new way to try and screw us over out there in the strait. It's just not good. It's not a good situation at all. And in the meantime, while we are seeing that the situation is not good, we did get to hear that the president stated, if we don't get the right answers to the peace deal that we proposed today, it goes very quickly. We're all ready to go. This is only like the 90th time we've heard this in a month and a half. We also were able to hear additionally that at the same time, the U.S. did send a new proposal to Iran today, according to Tasnim News, and it does appear that at the moment we are waiting to see what the Iranians will respond with. I will tell you.
Well, remember, you're forgetting something. You're forgetting a big detail right here. At the request of Pakistan.
Oh, yes. At the request of Pakistan. I forgot.
I had to add that in. They said, also, by the way, to be serious for a second, the U.S. sent the proposal through Pakistan to deliver to the Iranians, because apparently the Pakistanis are good friends with the Iranians. Who would have guessed that? So that's who's delivering the new proposal. It's going to be the Pakistani delegation. They'll give it to the Iranians. The Iranians will spit on it. They'll give it back to the Pakistanis, and we'll take back the document, and we'll probably restart from square one again. So that's what's happening as we speak.
Well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that the Pakistani guy who's carrying the deal over there, from what we're hearing right now, is going to show up in Tehran. He's going to say, "Here's all the U.S. terms. The U.S. terms are still maximalist on our end. We're still trying to achieve all of our war goals." From what we're hearing, the Iranians are going to go, "Wow, that's really neat. So here's our counter proposal. We want all of the sanctions lifted. We want all of our assets unfrozen. We want to control the Strait of Hormuz forever. We want all U.S. forces to withdraw from the region, and also we want the U.S. to give us tons of money and reparations." Send that back and see what they think. They've done that at least 10 times now over the past month and a half. Now, there is a point, folks, when you have to say that mental competency has to be questioned if you get the same answer 10 times and you go for it an 11th time. If I went up to someone, folks, and I said, "Could you give me $5?" and then they said, "No," I'm not going to go up to them a second time even and ask them for $5. Their answer was no. That's what it is. When you go for the 11th time and ask them if you can get $5, and they've said no the past 10 times, and now you're going up to them an 11th time and asking them, "Can I get $5? Would y'all expect for the answer to finally be yes, or would y'all expect for it to be no, considering that we've heard no the past 10 times? We've heard no the past 10 times, so we're not getting $5. And in this situation, we've asked them to open up the strait, and we've asked them for a peace deal about 9 times at this point, and we have not seen them accept a single peace deal once. They've, in fact, rebutted every single one and then countered it with the most maximalist demands that they could aim on their end, which is showing us that diplomacy isn't going to work. It's achieving absolute.
Okay, so I agree with him about that. Now, this is what I'm trying to tell you. This is what General Kane is doing. They're building up defenses around the perimeter, and then they're actually rearming all their carriers, all their destroyers, and submarines, fully loaded. And you know what? They might even be breaking out something new. Now, we've seen earlier when the first couple, I think it was like first week of the war or the conflict actually started, they actually used a new weapon, and he actually talked about it on the Benny Johnson show. And it looked like they used. I'm not even exaggerating over this, but it looked like they used a new laser space weapon. I'll have that on the show for y'all tomorrow night to see, and I'm telling you, it's crazy. It lit up the whole sky. I'm sure y'all probably seen it already, but if y'all have it, we'll have it on the show tomorrow night.
Nothing at this moment, and that means that the only option we have is the resumption of armed conflict and forcing them to meet our demands by not having any armed forces left to be able to oppose us and our demands. That's quite literally the only option that we have left. And a lot of people seem to be talking about this at the moment right now, about the United States officials saying that they're hours away from some sort of a deal. And a lot of people are starting to talk about whether or not making a deal with the Iranians would be a good idea or a bad idea. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that at the moment right now? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so we've heard today from a couple of different mainstream sources that allegedly the U.S. is hours away from a deal with Iran. So, will it be a good or a bad decision? Because we don't know what the deal is going to include. The Iranians are out here saying that the deal is very favorable to them. We've also heard another detail that apparently the U.S. president allegedly had a phone call with Bibi Netanyahu last night, and according to some people that claim they have knowledge of the call, they said that Bibi's hair was on fire by the end of the call. So it sounds like maybe it was a very heated discussion, according to what we've heard, which could indicate, because Israel's position is always to go to war with Iran, it could indicate that a deal actually is close to being made, and Israel's not happy about it because they don't think that Iran's going to abide by the deal. So will it be a good or a bad decision if there is a deal? 53% said no, it gives Iran what they want, and it's a bad decision. 28% said it depends on the details, really. And 9% said it will be good for the United States to basically end the war and make a deal. So at this point, here's the catch. Whatever deal is being made right now, if there is such a deal being made, it's not going to end the war. That's the catch. The deal that's being discussed right now is simply to get negotiations started again. That's purely what this is all about. So this is basically the appetizer. The moment the appetizer gets served, we then need to make it to the entree, which is going to be even harder to make a deal with Iran at that point. And even if we're able to make a deal, Iran's not going to abide by it, as they proved with the JCPOA during the Obama administration. They didn't abide by that one either. So why would they abide by a new one, especially while they're still chanting death to America? That wouldn't make much sense whatsoever. So I'm going to say I'm with the 54%. Making a deal with Iran right now is basically admitting defeat, in my opinion, because Iran is still solidifying control over Hormuz Strait. They're still threatening and launching attacks into Iraq at the U.S.-backed Kurdish positions, and their proxy forces are still launching attacks at Israel. So in reality, folks, what has changed? The only thing that's changed is the United States' position in the Middle East has gotten severely weakened, and we've lost some service members in the process. And to make a deal at this point would be probably very bad for everybody. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 54% that it gives the Iranians what they want, but I also have to add on, because I would generally agree with everything that Matthew said, but I have to add on here something that's very important in terms of strategy. If you let me give an example here. So if
Now, look, I'm not trying to give anything away or anything like that, but I'm just going to let y'all know Friday night, y'all might want to be on your seats and strap in. Because if they ain't got negotiations over with by this weekend, I'm just going to let you know that all hell will break loose in the Middle East. I'm just going to let you know that now. They have not been stalling this long and rearming this long for nothing.
If we say, folks, that we are the strongest, toughest, roughest person in the world, I'm a marksman, a quick shot with a 6-shooter, nobody can beat me. And also on top of that, I got the muscles to boot. I can beat anybody around that I want to. And that's the claim that I've made my entire life, say, hypothetically. And then out of the blue, some little pipsqueak comes up, and while I'm walking into a door, and they block the doorway, and they go, "You aren't coming through, jackass, go somewhere else." And I sit there and go, I'm the roughest, toughest guy, great with a 6-shooter, but I'm not going to shove around this little guy and throw him out of the doorway, because while I clearly could, and on top of that, I could rain fire on his whole family and burn his house down and whatnot, I'm not going to do that because I don't know. And then I just walk off. You look like a weakling. Like you completely shattered this entire image that the world has of you as this rough, tough, quick shot with a 6-shooter deal. You look like a wimp. And that's what we're in the situation with Iran right now. We can't just walk away without challenging their control of the Strait of Hormuz, because if we do that, then we have shown that the Iranians can do this at any time in the future, and we are completely powerless, mentally even, to challenge it and break the blockade. We have to just break the blockade at this point, not just for the actual practical purposes of reopening the strait. We have to do it for the strategic purpose of showing the world and showing the Iranians that this won't work. Because if we show them right now that this can work, and this is a significant leverage they have against us, and we don't have any active strategy or willpower to challenge them, they're going to do this at any point they feel like it would be to their advantage. Like, say, here in the future, so for example, we start saying some rhetoric against the Iranians they don't like, they just snap the Strait of Hormuz shut. And then they make us work back and apologize on our statement, or otherwise they just keep it closed. And we've now put them in a position where they feel comfortable to do that, and the whole world will start to know that the Iranians are a significant power broker.
But let's be real, though. Let's be real. How many people watching the stream right now truly think that a deal is actually close? I mean, if we're being completely honest here, do we really believe that report? I personally really doubt it severely, but we're just examining the poll here, the hypothetical that if it is true by some, fluke, if it turns out to be true that they are actually close to a deal, then, would it be good or bad? But in reality, though, the odds of them being close to a deal is probably like 5%. Like, it's probably negligible for the most part, because we've heard this before. We've heard for over a month that they were close to a deal. And I see everybody in the chat, they're saying, hell no, nobody believes that. And I can see right here in the chat that literally nobody believes. I don't see a single yes in the chat. So I think that pretty much proves the point I'm trying to make right here, that it's probably a bunch of bogus. The U.S. either has to launch the attack or they have to keep stalling, one or the other. And like we were sort of saying last night, I hate to be a broken record, but the U.S. is probably stalling for a strategic reason, and they're probably holding off on attacks for that reason. Not because a deal's close, but because there's something else in the background that we have not been made aware of in the public. So that's my guess. I doubt a deal's close.
Well, you know what? Also, this is like right here. This is because the 72. Let me just be frank with everybody here. The 72-hour deadline thing was bullshit. So now they've come up with this whole thing today of we're sending this peace deal to Iran. So that way, when the timer runs out on the 72 hours, which is 48 hours from now, they're then going to say, right now there's currently a deal on the table with the Iranians that they're looking at, and so it wouldn't really be a proper time to restart attacks. So at the request of Pakistan, we stop this one again. And we're going to give them another week until we obliterate them and wipe them off the face of the planet to agree to some. That's probably how this is going to go again, I would assume at this point, because I would also have to agree with everybody. I don't think a deal is coming around the corner, and if it was coming around the corner, that would be worse than no deal coming around the corner, at least with what we're seeing right now and how that would turn out. That would be worse than actually just continuing on the war or just continuing on floundering around right now until we figure out what we want to do. But moving us on out of that and getting us back.
Also, by the way, I gotta say, I didn't mean to set the chat off. Like, the chat just went berserk when I just asked that question right there. People were vehemently saying no to that question right there. Like, people do not believe that a deal's close. Like, it's wild. I've not seen the chat move that fast in probably ages with that one right there. That was wild.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that either. The chat rate, by the way, folks, got up to I think 1,000 chats a minute there for about a minute or two. So that was actually pretty crazy. But moving us on out of that, we have also been able to hear that within the area outside of the Strait of Hormuz, there has been some fairly interesting developments within the Arabian Sea, as an Iranian tanker was boarded today by U.S. Marines, according to the U.S. military and their statements earlier in the day. We've also been able to additionally see that airborne tankers were up and operational near to Kuwait today, most likely sustaining combat air operations within the area. And we additionally got reports out of the capital of Iran on what their position is at the moment publicly. According to MB Ghalibaf, which is the chief negotiator of the Iranians currently, he has stated that the United States seeks to start new war. And that's according to his own claims. So, from what they understand, they're forcing the United States to go back to war with them, which is giving us an idea that they are not anywhere close to making a deal with the United States, because if they were, why would they be thinking that the war is going to be restarting anytime soon? Like, everything that we see, folks, is pointing towards the Iranians are basically at this point trying to force us to go back to war with them, because they're not agreeing with anything, and they're going out of our way to insult us, and somehow our diplomatic folks are too blind or too goofy to understand that, and they just keep running into a brick wall with the Iranians for an entire month and a half trying to get anything done with them. We also were able to see that another statement was made by MB Ghalibaf, where he once again stated that the country needs to raise security readiness for possible upcoming attacks, once again showing that they are working off the concept they're largely trying to force the United States back into a war with them at this point, because they're not budging on any of their talking points or any of their demands from the United States, and that would generally lead most people to assume that the war would restart at some point in the future. We also were able to see that they held another little pro-regime rally today inside of Tehran. As many of y'all know, a lot of this is generally staged. They tell people to get out of their workplaces and go to this rally or they're going to lose their job. That's usually how it works in authoritarian countries like this, but we were able to see it right here. They're down there singing little songs and whatnot. Not kumbaya, it's the opposite of kumbaya. I don't know what that is, but it's certainly not anything peaceful. They're probably chanting for death to America and whatnot down there in the crowd, because that's usually a pastime of the pro-regime rallies inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Moving us on out of that, we did get to hear that the IRGC and IRGC-affiliated forces did conduct another attack on Kurdish forces within the area around Erbil, which we got to see the smoke rising from one of these explosions of a drone that conducted the attack, once again confirming that the IRGC and its affiliated militias inside of Iraq are continuing to conduct proxy attacks against the Kurds and are trying to weaken one of the more significant U.S. allies within northern Iraq. We also were able to hear that there was a denotation of heavy jet activity over Daraa in Syria, which is within the As-Sawaida government within the southern area of the country. This might not have anything directly to do with the Iran situation, as we do understand that the Israelis have been heavily involved in trying to encourage the Druze minority within the As-Sawaida government to continue some form of resistance against al-Jilani's regime for reasons that we haven't really been able to iron down exactly at the moment as to why that's being done, but still that's largely an ongoing objective of the Israelis at this moment, and there has been significant support for the Druze inside of southern Syria as a result of a great deal of other actions historically that are a significant rabbit hole. But moving us on out of all of this, this is generally the picture that we are getting out of the Middle East for the day. But a lot of people are still talking about the attack that the IRGC has conducted on Kurdish forces within northern Iraq. And a lot of people are wondering what in the world is going on with the fact that the U.S. has not responded to any of the attacks that the IRGC has conducted on the Kurdish allied forces that we have within northern Iraq. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that at the moment? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so in the midst of the alleged ceasefire still being in place, which at this point, I don't really think it's really in place. I think most people are kind of in agreement on that. Iran has launched yet another attack on U.S.-backed Kurdish forces in Iraq this time, and the U.S. did not respond to it from the looks of it. So what are your thoughts? 71% said the U.S. should have responded to it and also, took care of the situation. 14% said the attack was not worth responding to, and 7% said the U.S. should only defend their sites only and let that be it. So here's the catch with this. The U.S.-backed Kurdish forces, they were allegedly, according to what we heard from U.S. officials, just supplied with a new round of weapons to give to the Iranian civilians to try to cause another uprising inside of Iran. So they're supposed to be doing that right now, and Iran just launched a brand new attack on those forces, and the U.S. largely did not respond to it. So I mean, if we're wanting the Kurds to come to our side, leaving them in the wide open and letting them get basically taking pot shots at by the Iranians probably isn't the best way to go about getting their favor. So I think the U.S. should have responded to it. I would say, and of course, this is near U.S. positions, by the way, I would say that they probably should have responded, but we really haven't seen a response, which is kind of interesting. So I'm with the 71%. But Enforcer, what say you?
We must help them. They've been curdling in the sun for some time, and it's time to say that we've had enough of a way that we need to go in and we must respond. There's a cheese joke in that. But in all seriousness, I would say that the United States has to respond at some point. I would have to say, folks, there's a million things that the U.S. should have responded to. The Iranians have conducted direct drone attacks on the UAE, on the Saudi Arabia, on Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and also Iraq, and the Kurds, over the course of the entirety of the ceasefire. There has been dozens of ceasefire violations at this point that the Iranians have conducted directly from their soil over the entirety of the ceasefire. Any single one of those is a flat-out violation of the ceasefire and should have deserved a response in any normal world, but for some reason the United States is working in a world of fantasy to where Iranian attacks are not Iranian attacks and attacks on our allies don't exist. And apparently that's so aggravating to enough of our allies that countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, for a temporary time, actually revoked the U.S.'s rights to be able to operate our forces off of their soil for some time as a response to these sorts of actions, and also the fact that they're not being let in the know by the United States on what's going on and what they plan on doing within the region anytime soon. And that right there ought to be giving us an indication that that we have to start responding at some point, because if we don't respond, a lot of our Middle Eastern allies are going to start viewing us as incredibly weak. I mean, if they didn't have any reason to look at us that way under the last administration, which was already quite weak in their responses against Iran during that period of time, they're certainly getting a very good argument for that right now in the current administration, because we went from complete inaction, which is a sign of weakness in the last administration, to overt actions that are now showing direct signs of weakness in the current administration. Both of them are not good for the U.S.'s position and long-term longevity of our sphere of influence within the Middle East, and it's probably going to be making the argument for a lot of Middle Eastern countries from our silence and inactivity that they might be better off security-wise with the People's Republic of China than they would be with us. And that would be a humongous thing to lose in the long run strategically, is seeing that all of these Middle Eastern free oil producing countries that are currently aligned with us begin to become aligned with the Chinese. That's not going to be a great thing in the long run for us, and it would be massively beneficial to the Axis powers. Moving us on out of the Middle East, however, we have also been able to hear of some very interesting developments up in Lithuania. And moving us on up into Europe for a brief moment, we did get to hear the following announcement today from the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense. Lithuania has issued an air alert in parts of the country after a suspected drone approaching from Belarus was detected near the border. NATO Baltic air policing has been activated. Right now at the moment, we understand that Lithuanian air defenses have apparently identified some drones that were crossing over the Belarusian border into Lithuania sometime recently, and we have been able to hear that a part of the Baltic Air Policing Detachment, which is a multinational air coalition made up of a significant amount of NATO partners, has scrambled fighter aircraft to be able to defend the skies of Lithuania. I do have to make it clear, Lithuania does not have an active or operational air force of fixed-wing air defense aircraft. That's usually something that has to be outsourced to other NATO allies, for example, the Republic of Poland, the Republic of France, the Greeks, the Romanians, and other countries that are a part of the Baltic Air Policing campaign over the Baltics, because actually none of the Baltic states actually have an active air force at the moment. They do have helicopters and stuff and some transport aircraft. Lithuania actually has transport aircraft, but that will do nothing in terms of active aerial air-to-air drone defense. So we do understand that there are some aircraft that have been scrambled as a result of this in the moment, and there is a decent amount of conjecture right now on what is really going on in the skies over Lithuania. We do know that there are drones making their way through Belarus, and we have to give the fact, folks, that we do not know exactly whose drones these are. And, of course, everyone's going to say, well, obviously the Russian and Belarusian. But I do have to make it clear, the prior incursions that have been conducted mostly by Ukrainian drones that have been diverted due to electronic warfare into the skies of Latvia and Estonia are starting to lead to a slight statistical probability that drones coming through Belarusian airspace into Lithuania could possibly be Ukrainian. We're not entirely sure on that, but there is about a 10 to 15% chance that they could be Ukrainian. The remainder of the 85% is highly likely Russian or Belarusian drones that are making their way into Lithuania. It really depends on what we find out from the Lithuanian MOD's investigation. The drone is highly likely going to crash on Lithuanian soil, which will allow for them to conduct a full investigation and be able to understand whose drone this actually is. It could be a Ukrainian decoy drone, it could be a Ukrainian Lyuti or an FP2, or it could be a Russian decoy drone, very similar in design to the Garan 2s that have been used by Russia, or it may actually be a Russian Garan 2. Such a drone has already landed in the Romanian city of Galati, and luckily was a dud and did not explode in the midst of the city when it impacted, but a very similar thing could be happening within Lithuania. This was also continuing to highlight the growing tensions in the airspace around the Baltic states, as the Russian Federation has conducted multiple overt air violations over these countries in the past few months. And we have also seen that now the Russian Federation is deliberately diverting Ukrainian drones into Baltic airspace through electronic warfare interference to be able to try and continue to increase the tensions between the Baltic states and the Russian Federation on the frontier hinterlands of the border. And right now, a lot of people are talking about what they believe these drones to be that flew into Lithuanian airspace. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that at the moment, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so at least it sounds like there was NATO fighter jets that responded to the situation, so they responded to it, but we don't know exactly if they shot these things down or not. According to what I've heard so far, it sounds like they simply observed them possibly, and that was about it. So now that we've heard that apparently several drones did enter from Belarus into Lithuania, which is a NATO country, what do you think is going on here? Because there is some speculation about it, but what do you think? 61% said it sounds like Russian drones, while 12% said it sounds like Ukrainian ones, and 20% said it's simply too early to tell right now. And I personally think that this case right here is likely Russian drones because Ukraine does not launch drones into Belarus. And let's say, for example, it was a Ukrainian drone that went into Russia and then was somehow redirected by Russian electronic warfare to Lithuania. That would be a little bit hard to believe because that's a long way to go across Belarus to get inside of Lithuania. And I don't think the electronic warfare has that capability to redirect it that far away. So it sounds to me like this was Russian drones. And also, by the way, we have to keep in mind that just because these countries are saying that it could be Ukrainian drones going off course, that doesn't mean it's necessarily always the case. Like, that doesn't always mean that. They could be trying to escalation manage, which is something we saw during the last 4 years of the U.S. administration. They could be trying to say that it's Ukrainian to avoid an escalation with Russia. They could be doing that as well, because to me, it seems a little bit weird that out of all the drone attacks that Ukraine's conducted over the years, all of a sudden out of the blue, all these Ukrainian drones are going into the Baltics. That seems a little bit weird to me. And now they're going through Belarus into Lithuania, which is another layer added to the puzzle. So I'm with the 60%. To me, it sounds like Russian drones, and I think it's probably some propaganda effort by Putin to make it look like Ukraine's attacking. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would actually believe that they're highly likely Russian. I do have to say, folks, that I have to give a bit of a disclaimer at the moment, because in prior times when we said that it very much appears to be a Russian drone in Latvia and Estonia, they turned out to be Ukrainian in some cases. In a couple of others, they were clearly Russian. But with the Lithuanian situation right now, there is a slight percentage chance that it could be a Ukrainian drone, but the high percentage chance is that it's Russian. Like Matthew said, and this is accurate, the state of Ukraine does not conduct drone attacks into the Republic of Belarus. That is highly unheard of. In fact, it's completely unheard of. That would be a significant violation of Belarusian sovereignty and may require a direct armed response or give Belarus an excuse to be able to join into the active conflict, which would not be in Ukraine's favor. And for that reason, they generally avoid conducting any sorts of drone attacks through the Republic of Belarus. Instead, they launch their drones from the Sumy Oblast and then fly them directly north along the very edge of the Russian Federation up towards the areas of St. Petersburg and also Vyborg. That's generally where their attacks are conducted normally. So there's a very high percentage in Ukraine's favor, Russian or Belarusian decoy drone, and we do understand that that is probably going to be the case once we hear about the investigation coming up here soon. That also, by the way, I do have to point out that as far as air defenses are concerned for the Lithuanians, they have some, but it's not really a great deal. They do have some NASAMS batteries that are able to conduct short-range air defense, and they also have their Swedish RBS-70 SHORADs that are also able to conduct short-range air defenses, but they generally just don't have a humongous amount of air defenses that are built into their armed forces, considering that it's still attempting to westernize and modernize. And also, they're finally growing out their military budget, at least in the modern day over the past 7 years, and usually adding new equipment like this and then sustaining it is fairly expensive to do at the onset, but pretty easy to keep up once you get the armed force up to a particular size. So generally, that's why we're also understanding that we're having to see that NATO forces are beginning to respond in larger form at the moment in the skies over Lithuania to help out with the air defense. But we actually have some breaking news coming out on Cuba at this moment. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so it looks like Cuba is deciding to go on the offensive. The Cuban government has just announced that it's organizing a large-scale demonstration to march all the way down to the U.S. Embassy in Havana to protest Raul Castro's indictment that was just announced today by the U.S. Department of Justice. So, also, by the way, where is this embassy? Like, can we see this on the map here and get an idea of where this thing is at? Because they just announced this story right now.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it. So this is the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba.
Honestly, kind of surprising we even have an embassy there, to be honest. It's kind of a surprise in itself. But so apparently, the Cuban government, which is currently led by, I forgot his name, Miguel Diaz something, that's who's currently the president of Cuba, and also Raul, who is the one who just got indicted. Raul holds some military power inside of Cuba. He's a little bit on the older side, but he still holds some influence. So he's the one that got indicted. The president, apparently, is helping to organize this demonstration in front of the embassy. So we don't know exactly what they're planning to do when they show up. It's got people's attention, obviously, so they're waiting to see what's going to happen. We'll have to see. Of course, unless the military shows up, it'll probably just simply be people, rioting outside or something like that, and it'll probably be the extent of it. But if the military or some other forces show up, that could make things a little bit interesting. We'll have to see.
And we don't really know what's going to be happening here. It might turn violent. If it turns violent, this could actually become a significant diplomatic incident between the United States and Cuba, which the U.S. could use as a justification to escalate, considering that they're looking for just about any excuse at this point to escalate the situation with the Cubans. And so we'll have to see how this turns out, but it does appear that the Cubans are attempting to create some sort of a demonstration in front of the U.S. Embassy to be able to make some sort of a point, but we're not really sure how successful that's going to be and what will come out of it, at least at the moment, but certainly going to be increasing the tensions to some limited extent, at least at the moment, as far as Cuba is able to do on their borders. I also had to say, I would assume that this demonstration would be somewhat small, unless they're able to just corral the people in Havana to get together to go down there to the U.S. Embassy, because considering that the entire public transportation system in Cuba is ground to a halt due to a lack of fuel in prior months, we would generally assume that most people won't be able to be bust into the city, considering the fact that there aren't any running buses in most of the country, or trains for that matter. So generally, I think that the demonstration, we'll have to see how it goes. I think it might not be that big unless they're able to get a whole bunch of people in the city of Havana to just walk there. But anyways, moving us on out of the news in Havana, Cuba, it is time for us to finally move on out of the Middle East and on into the rest of the news that we have out of Lithuania as well and elsewhere in Europe. But before we get on into the rest of our news, I do have to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to know that so many people have been here and watching this channel over the course of the night. We've had a peak viewership tonight of 16,000 people, and 56,000 people have watched the stream over the first hour. We're always honored and extremely appreciative to know that so many people continue to consider this channel to be their primary source of news, and I hope that you'll been enjoying it a great deal tonight. Now, before we move on into the rest of our news, because we still have a couple of things to cover in Europe, and then a great deal to cover about Cuba, which is pretty on point at this point, we are going to be making sure to get to talk to a couple of people in the chat. We're going to be getting 3 questions from the chat, and then moving on to the rest of the news that we have for the night. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of the night, this one's going to go to Ghostbuster, and thank you very much, Ghostbuster, for that $50 support, and we do appreciate it very much. I can't recall, but I think that might be your first ever super chat on the channel, and we do appreciate that, of course, because that does help keep the channel running. And Ghostbuster said, LSA 2-ish plus years, and do you have a different page with your old videos? I'm trying to educate somebody, and I don't see many of your old videos, and how do I find the videos of the Korean columns?
Thank you so much for the incredible support, Ghostbuster, and they should be there because our channel keeps every single one of the videos that we upload unless if YouTube takes it down, and YouTube is very rarely taking down anything of ours. I think at some of our very earliest streams, like in the first week, a couple of those were taken down by YouTube for myriads of reasons. For some reason, I forgot what their explanation even really was, but most of them should be available and visible, including our short war videos. If it looks like there's any gaps in short war video coverage, it isn't that those videos are hidden. It's just that we don't make the short war videos consistently. We kind of just make them whenever we can get enough news. And sometimes we could go on a dry spell for like a week and a half before a video comes out again, because there's just not enough news to make a video in the midday sometimes. So I hope that helps to answer the question fairly well, because all of our live streams are still visible and public here on the channel, and also all of our short war videos are as well. So a humongous thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and I hope that you can find the Korean column stuff, because the live streams are there, and I'm pretty sure that they'll have something about the Koreans in the title, because that was a pretty big thing when it was happening back in the day when the Koreans got involved in the conflict during the Battle of Kursk. So if you want to find that the easiest way, I think the best thing to do would be just pull up on YouTube YouTube, and let me go pull it up here on the side to go see, so that way I can try and help get an answer on this. The Enforcer, North Korean Kursk. Let me type that in and see if it gets it for me. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, actually, you can just find it right here. I just typed in The Enforcer, North Korean Kursk, and it literally pulls up every single one of our live streams, short war videos, and everything else in between that talks about the North Koreans in the Battle of Kursk. So I hope that does give you the best answer that we can. And once you find this live stream right here, you can pretty much find the rest of them, because they were heavily engaged in the Battle of Suja, or the Battle of Kursk as it's called, for a while. And then we ended up, stopping our coverage on them, because most of them got wounded and killed. And so they weren't really an active fighting unit anymore on the front after a couple of weeks of being engaged against Ukrainian forces. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 support from Music Uploader, and thank you very much, Music Uploader, as well, for that $20 support. They said, question, if willful protesters can get bailed out, then how come they can't bail out us truckers? Forcing the market to resist our higher freight price bids to keep inflation low isn't a tactic. It's doing damage to the economy. LSA.
And I gotta say, it's a good question, and the answer is because the government doesn't ever really know much of what it's doing these days, unfortunately, as far as what kind of damage they're inflicting and how to mitigate that, or anything along those lines. They really don't do much of anything like that. You know, it's always funny, because there was an old saying I used to hear, and I really didn't subscribe to it, but nowadays I'm starting to become a big subscriber. When any of us fail out here and our business implodes, then that's just the work of capitalism. But God forbid the poor, innocent shareholders see their company implode, then the government's got to give them a bailout. And I don't really know why that's well, we all know why that's the case. That's because those are the people who lobby to get those people elected. But for the rest of us out here, we just have to work with the raw capitalist system, which sometimes they can kind of screw us over by, making bad decisions, raising the prices of things directly by their own bad decisions and planning, and then we basically have to pay the outcomes and the results there. But a huge thanks to you for support, and I hope this channel keep running, Music Uploader, and I hope that it does address that the best I can. But long live the Least Spring Army. The Least Spring Army will never truly die. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
All right, and this one goes to Fred Johnson. And thank you very much, Fred, as well, for the 20. And he said, I had fun with NATO and Norway today. Got coins saying Hill Air Force Base, Utah, FMS. That's also pretty cool, by the way. That's out here where we are. I said Precision Guided Munitions Tactical Coordination Group and Naval Surface Warfare Center, Indian Division. And what are they here to sell?
Fifth Ed sell guns, and lots of them. They're there to try and win over the hearts and minds of the Norwegian people. And that's really cool that you actually got to run into some folks that were apparently from Hill Air Force Base. Hill Air Force Base is just south of Ogden, Utah. We are in the Salt Lake City area, in what I call the Bowl. But the way up there, just south of Ogden, is Hill Air Force Base, and that is actually really cool. They base a lot of F-35s out of Hill, and a couple of other, I believe, squadrons as well. It's a very big air base as far as they go here in the States, and they also have a significant ammunition depot and storage here as well, which is operated as a part of the Hill Air Force Base kind of complex. So really neat, honestly, that you got to get one of those coins. And as far as the Precision Guided Munitions Technical Coordination Group and the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Indian Division, the Naval Surface Warfare Center, I believe, is based somewhere around Annapolis, Maryland, if I'm not mistaken. It's somewhere around the Washington, D.C. area, I'll have to say, to give the broadest scope I can, because I don't know exactly where that one is, it's somewhere between Annapolis, Maryland, and Norfolk. I'm not really sure outside of that, and that's a pretty big swath, but it's somewhere within that area. And the other one, the Precision Guided Munitions Group, I wouldn't know where that one is, but that's really cool to hear that you got some coins, and we're able to hang out with NATO forces today in Norway. And so humongous thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel keep on running, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to get on into the rest of the news for the night, and moving us on into Belgium. We were able to hear at the NATO headquarters in Brussels today that NATO Secretary General warned Russia of devastating consequences if nuclear weapons are used against Ukraine. And he said, well, Russians, know if that happens, the reaction is devastating. Of course, we follow that exercise, and we're monitoring what is happening. This is because right now in Russia, there's an ongoing nuclear readiness exercise at the moment, and so this statement was made as a response to that. As far as Western responses, I would hope that they're pretty severe, and I would hope that they'd follow through with what the Secretary General is claiming in NATO. At the same time, we have been able to see that some of the foreign policy actions, rhetoric, and statements from the United States recently has started to kind of bite into Boeing's contracts in the long term. Italy has actually canceled their bid for Boeing aircraft, and have actually went and bought 6 Airbus A330 Voyager tankers in replacement for $1.4 billion. The Italian Ministry of Defense has awarded a contract to Airbus for the planned procurement of a fleet of 6 A330 multi-role tanker transport aircraft as a part of a deal valued at $1.6 billion US, or 1.4 billion euros, including 10 years of support services. The Italians was initially intended to acquire the Boeing-made KC-46 Pegasus tankers in 2022. However, by December of 2024, the procurement was abruptly halted due to changed and unforeseen needs. Italy will now become the 19th nation to operate the A330 tankers and will be gradually replacing their older 767-based tankers that they've been running for some time. So it does appear, and also, by the way, we've been seeing this a lot recently, and while we've been saying things like in 2024 where they're seeing some change and unforeseen needs, a lot of countries in Europe have been quietly canceling a lot of contracts for U.S. arms equipment and also other U.S., I guess you could say, products for the larger part, if we want to describe it that way, because they're starting to see the United States is becoming significantly unreliable in foreign policy, and a lot of these countries have also seen that the current administration is more than willing to threaten the halt of shipments of any spare parts and weapon systems to keep their U.S.-bought weapons running if they end up disagreeing with the United States, which is a significant national security risk, and due to the unreliability in this uneasy alliance that now exists at this point, a lot of them are beginning to cancel their contracts and replace them with European-made equipment, so that way, if at some point in the future they go, I don't really like what the United States is doing, the United States can't try and just screw them over in every way conceivable. So, once again, it does look like our foreign policy actions right now are starting to bite into the bottom dollar of a lot of our larger legacy companies here in the United States of America, which generally thrive in the export market. Moving us on from that, we have been able to hear that at the same time, inside of Cuba, the United States has been conducting more reconnaissance routes with MQ-4 Tritons around the entirety of Cuba, which is showing us that they are continuing intelligence gathering operations around the island nation. We've also been able to additionally hear that according to information that came out that CBS reported on today, the U.S. intelligence community has been exploring how Cuba might respond to an American military action, and work on developing military options for the president has begun, according to two U.S. officials with knowledge to the matter. We've also been able to hear that at the same time, according to the president of the United States, CIA operatives are on the ground in Cuba right now, and they are freeing up Cuba. I gotta say, folks, I don't know what it is with the president, but I feel like the president is one of the biggest threats to agents on the ground in the CIA, because he basically just says, oh, they're out there and they're working. It's like, it's like if they're talking to anybody in the Cuban government right now, you know what the Cuban government's about to do in response to this? They're quietly going to increase security and surveillance on their government officials, if it's possible. And that might put a lot of these agents in jeopardy if they end up getting caught with, say, a Cuban official trying to talk to them and win them over to give some info to the United States. That might not go well, because generally they always know that this kind of stuff is going on. Every country in the world knows that this is going on in the intelligence world. But literally sounding an alarm on it might put some additional attention on it and might make them ramp up security a little bit farther than they normally do, which isn't really what you want to do in a situation like this. Generally the intelligence agencies are supposed to be pretty quiet and low key, so that way they don't end up getting, caught by basically screaming, I'm a super spy, look at me. But a lot of people are talking right now about the situation with Cuba and what would happen if the United States actually did get involved in some sort of a military action against the communist Cubans. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so U.S. Intel is currently researching how Cuba would react to U.S. military action. So what is your assessment in the public? 44% say Cuba will largely get pushed over, while 36% said Cuba will start guerrilla warfare, and 12% said Cuba will pose a domestic U.S. threat if U.S. military action were to start on the island. And I would say, I think largely Cuba will probably get pushed over to a large degree, but we don't know what kind of resistance on the ground we're going to be facing there. They obviously can't really pose a military threat, like in a direct sense to the United States. Even if they had 200 or 300 drones or whatever that report was that recently came out, that's not going to be a big deal. We can simply shoot those drones down and we'll get rid of that threat. But the problem is this. If Cuba does start guerrilla warfare and they try to start these campaigns to attack U.S. forces that try to occupy Cuba, that could turn into a quagmire, kind of like we were talking about with Venezuela. Notice that the U.S. did not try to occupy Venezuela. They simply went in, grabbed Maduro, and they left the government in charge. I'm not sure what they're planning to do in Cuba, but they say they're trying to replace the government there, which could mean an occupation possibly. So if the Cubans start a guerrilla warfare campaign, it could get ugly. You don't need a massive military force to do that. You simply need, small arms and a whole bunch of people willing to fight, and that's all it takes for that. So,
and I definitely agree with that, because Cuba is not even a military. They can't even keep their electrical right now.